Hey guys, MiracleMAX here. Today I'm looking at a Mazda 626 2002 model with hesitation and also engine miss problems. So let's get stuck into it. And we're looking about 230,000 clicks on the clock. So it's not under heavy acceleration that it's playing up, it's just mid throttle. Let's see how we go. There we go. Alright, so see that? It hesitated before it picked up. It does get worse with heat, so I'm leaning toward ignition system side of things, but I mean it could be anything. It could be a lean mixture, vacuum leak, spark plug leads, coils, the list goes on and on. So it's not just about guessing at this point. We want to diagnose the fault, don't we? So that'll be the path that I'm taking. I'll be doing some checks for ignition side of things. Start with the basics first. Start with the simple things first. That's what it's all about. Let's see if we can do it again. There we go. At least it's consistent, I'll give it that much. So for this little Mazda 626, I'm going to start with the basics. I've already mentioned what I think the problem may be. Could be some sort of ignition fault. Perhaps it could be spark plugs, leads, coils, who knows. Let's just start with the basics. So perhaps let's have a look at the spark plugs themselves. Before we can get our spark plugs out, we need to remove our plug leads. Make sure that you remove them from any hold down clips so that you have plenty of stretch on your plug leads. And when you remove your plug leads, just give them a bit of a wiggle and gently pull them out. Do not pull them on the plug lead themselves, but actually the boot itself. So grab a hold of that, give it a wiggle and pull it out. It's also a good idea to put the spark plugs out. Aha, found the problem already. Excellent. It's also a good idea to put your spark plugs out in exactly the same order that you found them. With these deep reach spark plug leads, this Bakelite section here quite often suffers from breakdown. So turn it right around, have a really good look at it, look for any cracks, splits, grey lines, anything like that. That will indicate that the plug lead needs to be replaced. If you remember one of my previous videos on the TJ Magna with the ignition fault, remember that was one of the problems that I had. We had tracking down the spark plug, and that was also coming through the plug lead as well. So this should turn into a fairly simple job, reason being I've found the fault already. Remember I said start with the basics. Now removing the spark plugs has given us access to the ignition system. This is the burning end of the system. This is where all the big bang happens. But if you have a close look at that number 1 spark plug, so if we count backwards, we've got 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's why you lay them out. Hang on a sec, let's have a close look at number 1 there. What do you notice there? See that big black line? That's called tracking. And what is happening is, it's actually easier for the spark to go on the outside of the insulator rather than go through the center electrode and jump to that gap there, which is the earth electrode. So this is why we have a miss, because we have a carbon track that's been developed. So the spark will go from here right down across there and it'll earth out through the spark plug body itself. So this is our fault. Let's not get cocky though, there's one other thing we need to check. Remember I said before that it could be plug leads that you need to check in this particular model. Let's have a look at number 1. So here's number 1 plug lead. I've carefully rotated the Bakelite section of it to have a look and see if I could find any faults with it. I can see a tiny bit of tracking along here, but in actual fact I'm not overly concerned about that section right now. So notice this here, if we have a look, get the light onto it, you can see this grey line heading down here. See that grey line? That actually corresponds to our spark plug tracking there. So that's what's happening. It's jumping down past here, going down here and across to here. You might say to yourself, well, that's not the only problem. Have a look at the rust around the side of the spark plug. I've mentioned before in one of my other videos that this is called just a coronal flare, and that just is because of oil buildup. Ions jump across there. It's nothing really to be concerned about, but this tracking 100% is the problem. At this point in time, it might be a sensible thing to do to check the resistance of the plug leads. This will tell us if they're in good condition or not. Since they're off already, let's do that. Of course, we'll need a multimeter to do that, and the setting that we'll use is ohms over here, the little omega sign there. Now, because this is a wasted spark ignition system, which means that the coil will care for 2 spark plugs at once, and so the coil is broken into 2 sections in this particular one. So it's easy to check the plug leads themselves. I prefer to do them through the ignition coil themselves. So what I do is I check one plug lead, it goes through the secondary of the ignition coil, and then it comes out another plug lead. So by testing 2 plug leads at once, including the coil, not only am I checking the condition of the plug leads, but also the coil itself. Then I compare it with the other 2 and see how that goes. So let's have a look at those readings. I've also made up some extension leads that I use with when I'm testing with the multimeter, and the reason being is they have little plug lead tops on them that I've soldered on there, and the beauty of course is that you can stick them into the plug lead and you've got a good connection there. So that's just how I do that. So in this particular case, this model does number 1. So there's number 1, that's the faulty one that we've been having trouble with the tracking on number 1. And number 4 is the other one, which is this fellow over here. So if I pop my 2 connectors in there, and then I put my test leads on those, that should give us an indication of what the resistance is actually like. That is reading 20.29 kilo ohms. Keep in mind that that is also recording the resistance inside the coil. So let's compare that now to our other plug leads, which will be number 2 and 3. And let's just see if that's an issue. And 2 and 3 are registering 19.73 kilo ohms, so there's only 1 kilo ohm difference. But if we're concerned about that, there's another thing that we can take it one step further. Of course, it's number 1 that's playing up, or the one that we've had trouble with the tracking. So let's just pull off number 1 itself and check that. So if we go to number 1, we're now connected into number 1 with our lead there. And then if we pull off number 1 over here, I can connect up to number 1. So I'm purely looking at number 1 at this point in time. And that's reading 4.78 kilo ohms. It should be 8 to 12 kilo ohms per 300 mil. So this is quite within an acceptable range. How do I know which lead goes to which coil? So if we zoom right in there, we can see that number 3 and number 2 are connected, and number 4 and number 1 are connected according to the sticker that's stuck on the coil. So that's what told me which plug lead was connected to the other end of the other plug lead. Now that I've determined that electrically the plug leads and the coil are in okay condition, at this point in time, not loaded of course, I've still got this tracking issue that I wasn't going to worry about initially, but I've put some thought into it, and what I'm going to do is just give it a try and see if I can sort the problem out. I figure that if the tracking mark is still within, now that I've replaced my spark plug, if the tracking is still within the inside of the insulator of the plug lead, sooner or later that is going to start misfiring again and again. So I priced the plug leads, they're around about 80 bucks my price, so they're not cheap. So I thought, well, I'll give this a try and see what happens. Now, getting off carbon, if we get off carbon in throttle bodies and things like that, we use a throttle body cleaner. Now, that's okay to a certain extent, but I'm going to try something called mass airflow cleaner. But the reason that I'm going to use that is because this cares for the plastic, and that's why we use this on mass airflow sensors, etc., because of the fact that this doesn't deteriorate the plastic. And I figure, well, the same issue may apply to the plug lead itself. So what I'm going to do is just spray these and try and wipe out that carbon track, and hopefully the track hasn't eaten away at the Bakelite. Perhaps we've just got it at the early stage, and that will be enough to solve the issue. So now I'll just wipe it out with my mass airflow cleaner and a rag and give it a good scrub out and just see what it's like inside after that. And I figure if I just twist it around and around, it'll be, if it's only an external thing where it hasn't actually eaten away at the Bakelite, then this should be a good enough repair or method to get rid of that carbon track that's been built up. Because I don't want the same problem to occur on the next spark plug, of course, the new one that I've fitted. So we'll just give it a good scrub out and see what it looks like afterwards. After spinning it around and examining it fairly closely, I really can't see any carbon track there anymore. So I'm going to actually leave it at this particular point in time and see if that see how it lasts. So I'm actually pretty happy with the results of using the mass airflow sensor cleaner. This is my personal car, so I'm going to give it a shot and see if that's actually solved the problem. For 80 bucks, I'd much prefer to see that in my pocket, but I've had a really close look at it and I can't see any carbon tracking in there now. Of course, with the new spark plug as well, there won't be a track there. But electrically, these plug leads are okay, and the coil, although they're not under load, of course, with an oscilloscope, but there's no carbon tracking there now. Number one spark plug is obviously the fault. We've got that big tracking line that's heading down there. I feel pretty confident that the plug lead is okay for now. If it plays up in the future, then I'll check it. But for now, number one spark plug, the fault. So now that I've pushed my plug leads down, let's see if it starts. Beautiful. Good job. We've now replaced our spark plugs and I'm happy with the results. All I have to do now is take it for a road test and make sure there's no hesitation, miss or anything like that. So the vehicle's up to operating temperature now, and I'm sitting on a slight gradient, and I'll just see if it's going to hesitate and miss now. That feels pretty good to me. I'll just give it a couple more turns and make sure that we've fixed it. That's hard acceleration, not a problem there at all. Once again, I'm on a bit of a gradient and no traffic. And no miss, no hesitation. Very nice.
He's very nice. No name.
Okay, so the Mega Beast is fixed. Awesome job. Awesome. Job's done. So I've had a successful road test with this Mazda 626 2002 model. Number one spark plug was definitely at fault. We could see that track mark going down the spark plug, couldn't we? I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. There's bound to be a button up there somewhere. Make sure you give it a like if you enjoyed it, and feel free to comment down below. So until next time guys, catch you later.